G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now, I've just published an article on my website titled Prime Minister Anthony Albanese busted protecting Peter Dutton after he arranged a secret meeting between Dutton and the AFP. Now, Anthony Albanese has set up an inquiry into Peter Dutton, and that inquiry is pretty well redundant already. It was a stitch-up, trying to make it look like he's doing something when he's actually done nothing. Because one of the key allegations against Peter Dutton in that inquiry is that the AFP were meant to brief him about a Mr Bajani in 2018, July 12, 2018, that Mr Bajani was under investigation by the Australian Federal Police for bribing officials on Nauru, while at the same time Mr Bajani is contracted by the Home Affairs Department, being paid millions of dollars. And it's not just that he was briefed about that, Mr Peter Dutton, but a month later, Mr Bajani won another $9 million contract. So obviously it raises a lot of questions. So a key part of that investigation is a meeting on the 12th of July 2018, where the AFP have told the Senate that they briefed Mr Dutton on that issue. And for whatever reason, Anthony Albanese arranged a meeting, or allowed Peter Dutton to organise a meeting with the AFP Commissioner, and now they've changed their story, and that's what this video is about. Well, firstly, we'll listen to Anthony Albanese and the new Minister for Home Affairs, Claire O'Neill, talk about the inquiry they've set up, and then we'll hear the Senate hearing from August the 4th, where 3 senators have grilled the AFP, and the AFP are ducking and weaving and changing their stories. So this is what Anthony Albanese and Claire O'Neill told Parliament on the 31st of July 2023.
Have been raised. We are acting quickly and decisively, and it is appropriate that an independent, eminent reviewer have a look at what has occurred, that departmental officials be obligated to cooperate if instructed to do so, and the ministers and people at the time, including the Leader of the Opposition, cooperate with an inquiry. Today we've announced that we will appoint Mr Dennis Richardson AC, a former Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Department of Defence and Director General of Security, someone I think is one of Australia's preeminent public servants, to have a full look and a thorough examination of this. The review will consider governance practices and these allegations in the wider context of serious issues that have emerged over this time. In particular, it will consider any integrity concerns about contracting arrangements regarding regional processing, whether public or otherwise, as well as the department's governance arrangements, not just to look at what's happened in the past, but to make sure that appropriate mechanisms are put in place in the future. I ask the Minister for Home Affairs to add to the answer.
Thank you, Speaker, and could I acknowledge the member for Goldstein's long-standing advocacy around integrity of government, and it's a passion that's very much shared by those of us on this side of the chamber. You saw one of the first actions of our government was to legislate for a National Anti-Corruption Commission, and you're a key advocate in that, so I just want to acknowledge that. The Prime Minister has covered quite comprehensively, I think, the response of the government here, but if I can fill in a few details. So the Parliament is aware there are very concerning allegations on the public record with regard to the management of offshore processing. The government is deeply concerned about those. As soon as these matters were raised, I asked the Home Affairs Department to look thoroughly at the current regional processing arrangements to ensure that they are legal and appropriate, and I've received that assurance from my department. In terms of the historic allegations, it is absolutely clear that these warrant further investigation. They're serious allegations and there is serious money involved, and no one is going to get to the bottom of this like Dennis Richardson is. Thank you.
So Claire O'Neill told the Parliament, as soon as they heard about it, they took action. They set up an inquiry. Well, bullshit. Everyone's known for years there's dodgy contracts going on with the immigration detention centres. And I'll read you out some of the headlines now. From 2019, Home Affairs denies it was desperate when $423 million Paladin contract was awarded. From 2020, Auditor General criticised Home Affairs over $745 million Manus Island contract. And here's another one from 2019. Paladin controversy prompts renewed scrutiny of $591 million Nauru deal. And in the video you're about to watch from the Senate hearing, you'll hear Senator Deborah O'Neill raise the fact in relation to Mr Bajani, who was all over the papers. She'll say, oh, there's articles in the ABC 2019, 2020. Of course the Federal Police knew. Of course the Home Affairs knew. And of course the Labor Party knew. Everyone's known for years. So for Claire O'Neill to say in Parliament the other day, oh, as soon as we heard about it, we took action. What bullshit. The Labor Party have been covering up for the last 12 months. As soon as they got into government, they should have had an inquiry into the dodgy contracts going out to all the immigration contractors. Now, I'm going to show you a video from the Senate estimates hearing on the 4th of August 2023, where three senators are absolutely grilling the federal police on the deal, because they're the ones who originally said they'd briefed Peter Dutton on the issue, but now they're backtracking, saying, oh, we didn't actually brief him on that issue. But there's a lot of lies being told by a lot of people, and you see them ducking, weaving all over the place.
Can the AFP please clarify for the committee if Mr Dutton was briefed by the AFP about an investigation into Mr Bajani?
Thank you, Senator. I will have Chief Police Officer Neil Gagan answer that, given that he was at that meeting.
Thanks, Senator. Neil Gagan, Chief Police Officer of the Australian Capital Territory. As the Commissioner has just stated, Senator, I was actually at the meeting with a number of other individuals. I confirm that a briefing on foreign bribery matter was undertaken with the then Minister for Home Affairs on the 12th of July 2018. However, I note that after a recent release of a question on notice from the AFP, which you've alluded to, there has been some misreporting and commentary that Mr Dutton was informed by the AFP that a then person of interest, Majami Bajani, or company Radiance International, was under investigation. To be clear, that is not correct.
So, before you go on, the answer to the question on notice that the AFP provided was not correct.
Yeah, I think, Senator, we accept the question on notice about this matter submitted earlier should have been used tighter language to avoid a misunderstanding, and I'll explain reasons why about that.
Before you do, when did you first become aware that the answer that the AFP gave on notice was not correct?
When we did a further research of our records and ascertained that, look, putting in keywords such as Nauru, we became aware of the fact that it was incorrect. So
when?
I'll have to take that on notice. I don't have that information in front of me.
Last week?
We'll be able to get that for you before this session's concluded.
In the last week, in the last month, in the last few days, give me a ballpark.
Within the last month.
Right. Do you understand your obligations as a witness before a Senate committee to provide accurate information
Absolutely.
and to correct the record if you've provided incorrect information?
That's what I'm doing now, Senator.
Do you understand that it's your obligation to correct the record as soon as you become aware that you gave false information to the committee?
We are.
Why did you not provide this update sooner if you're aware sooner?
Well, we're doing it now, Senator.
No, you're only doing it because I've asked you to. Had I not asked you to, would you have ever updated the committee?
Absolutely.
When would you have done so?
We would have done it within the next few days, Senator.
Well, an opening statement would have been a good opportunity to do it. As Senator Shoebridge interjects, you're providing an update on a lot of other matters. You're aware that you gave incorrect information to a Senate committee and you didn't choose to do so in the opening statement, Commissioner?
No, Senator. I think without going into too much detail, it actually, we had to go wider than our own agency on this, Holdings, and that's how we discovered some additional material.
I hope you would have done so on the first occasion that you were answering a question about it, not only after it became a contentious issue in the media.
I think, as we said, we could have used what we'd say, tighter language, and we relied on supplementary information that actually came from another department as well.
That's correct.
So the public speculation, which we've had for about 2 weeks now, that the Minister for Home Affairs was briefed specifically about an individual who was under investigation, was not true.
That's correct.
And the AFP would have observed that media coverage. You didn't want to put out a statement. You didn't want to write to the committee.
Well, I won't speak for the Commissioner, but he has met with the opposition leader.
Well, I'm sure Mr Dutton's grateful that he's had that update directly, but your obligation is not just to him. In fact, your primary obligation is to the Senate, and you haven't fulfilled it.
Well, respectfully, I disagree. We have.
Only now that I've asked you about it. Had I not asked you about it, when would we have known?
Well, we've
In a couple
We're
of
saying
days.
it right now, so I think that's...
Couple of days, that's what they said.
Senator
In a couple of
Shoebridge,
days.
interjections are disorderly.
What prevented you from updating the committee earlier?
Well, again, Senator, we're required to make sure that everything we say, given the sensitivities around these issues, that it's 100% correct. So we've been checking everything, all of our records, noting that there's ex-members who were there as well. I wasn't there, this is 5 years ago, and we made the decision to make sure that we got this 100% correct.
But you've just answered my question now, so you're obviously confident it is correct. So there was no barrier to answering the question now. Did that really just materialise this morning before the committee, or have you known for it some time, given you briefed Mr Dutton?
This week we were able to establish that.
Okay. Can I ask you to reflect on the future and the way in which you engage with the Senate and its committees, that if you have given false information to the committee, even if it's inadvertent or innocent, which I accept it probably was in this instance, I don't think you would have deliberately given the false information.
It wasn't false information.
I'd take you on that, Commissioner, but the first opportunity you have to correct the record, you must do so.
Charged. What was he charged with, and when was the trial, and when was he convicted? So we could just get a clear timeline about what was happening.
Thank you, Senator. I will hand to the Chief Police of the ACT, who has knowledge of Operation Regatta.
Thanks, Senator. The operation commenced in 2015. Allegation into Radiance International Proprietary Limited and its related group of companies. The allegation being that they provided bribes to members of the Nauruan government in order to secure contracts. The investigation progressed, and on the 13th of September 2018, a series of search warrants were executed in Brisbane, Sydney, in relation to Radiance International and Mr Bajani. Mr Bajani was charged with 2 offences on the 14th of September 2018, alleging between August 2015 and July 2017 of causing bribes to be paid to foreign public officials of
Sorry,
the
could you just restate those dates you mentioned?
Sorry, I'll slow down. So he was charged with 2 offences that between August 2015 and July 2017 of causing bribes to be paid to foreign public officials to the Republic of Nauru, contrary to section 70.21 of the Criminal Code Commonwealth. On the 19th of August 2020, Mr Bajani was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months imprisonment. Conviction recorded as causing bribes totaling $1.29 thousand to be paid to foreign public officials contrary to the previous criminal code I just read out, which being section 70.21 of the Criminal Code 1995.
What was the amount again?
$129,000.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think that's all, Senator. I might have missed some of the questions you asked, so if I covered them all.
No, that's it. When did it start? 2015?
Correct.
The inquiry, yep. What did it relate to? Who was investigated? When was he charged? What was he charged with? And when was the trial?
There was no trial. From what I can understand, the trial was sometime between the 14th, I don't have the exact date, sometime between the 14th of September 2018 and when he was sentenced on the 19th of August 2020.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you can provide that date on notice,
We'll
just
take
for
that on
clarification. I'd like to ask some questions about the AFP's investigation of Radiance International and Mr Dutton's knowledge of that investigation. And I understand there's been a lot of discussion about the AFP briefing of Mr Dutton on the 12th of July 2018. Now, could you just give me details about what time that briefing took place?
It was on the 12th of July 2018, but my understanding was it was in the afternoon. I don't have any exact time.
Okay, so on the 12th of July in the afternoon, there was a briefing of Mr Dutton.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you tell me, was that conducted in person or over the phone?
Yeah, certainly, Senator. So the meeting was conducted in the office of Mr Dutton. I was present as
Here in Canberra?
Yes, in Parliament House.
Okay.
I was present. The Commissioner of the Australian Border Force, Michael Outram,
Sorry, could you say his name? And
Michael Outram.
A-L?
Outram.
I don't know how to spell it.
O-U-T-R-A-M, I think.
Thank you.
The acting commissioner of the AFP at the time, Ramsey Jabor, and a deputy secretary of the Department of Home Affairs, Linda Geddes, was also present. I think it's important to state, Senator, that Mr Dutton wasn't briefed in relation to Bajani or Radiance International. He was briefed in relation to some concerns that the AFP had around the overt activity and the potential impact that would have on the relationship with the Nauruan government. In the context...
So before we go on to further, can I just get this really clear for myself? It's a pretty heavy-duty set of people there briefing
And I'm about
the Minister for Home Affairs about significant matters.
Yes.
With yourself there, the AFP Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, and the head of... Mr Outram was...
Head of Border Force.
Border Force, okay. So putting aside what was covered in the briefing, in recent times, Mr Dutton has denied any briefing took place at all on the 12th of July.
No, I think he's denied that he was briefed in relation to Mr Bajani.
Well,
he wasn't briefed in relation to Mr Bajani.
He was definitely briefed in the afternoon of the 12th of July.
That's the record of the meeting,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Kershaw, this morning the AFP provided some additional information about the briefing that took place, and we've just had a little bit more from Mr
Gagan.
Gagan, thank you very much. But to be clear, contrary to what Senator Patterson suggested this morning, the AFP's original response to the question on notice was correct. There was a briefing of Mr Dutton on the 12th of July.
Senator, I think the question on notice and the supplementary information we provided today has made it, I think, fairly clear that Mr Dutton was not briefed in relation to Radiance International or Mr Bajani. He was briefed in relation to concerns the AFP had in relation to our overt activity impacting on the relationship with the Nauruan government, and that was the reason why such senior people were in the room. And it's really important that we provide some context in relation to what else was occurring in Nauru around that time.
Okay.
And
So-
now, two important meetings, Senator. It's really important we get this on the record. So,
Can I just ask a couple more questions?
Sure.
And I'll come back to you to do that. But the AFP told the committee Mr Dutton was briefed about Operation Regatta on the 12th of July 2018, which was the investigation, the AFP's investigation of Mr Bajani. A briefing did take place. You now say that it was not specifically about that matter, but you've clarified in your just most recent comment, it was about Nauru.
that's correct.
It was about Nauru. So we've heard this morning, what we've heard this morning is that you don't know if Radiance International and Bajani were specifically mentioned by name in that briefing. You have no record of that.
I'm adamant it wasn't. I mean, the purpose of the briefing, and this is where the context is really important, is that a couple of months after the briefing, and with our overt activity, and I've given you the date of the search warrants, the Pacific Island Forum was held in Nauru between the 13th and 15th of September, and the Pacific Island Chiefs of Police meeting was held in Nauru in August of 2018. We were concerned that our overt action would impact on the ability of Australian officials to attend those meetings. That's the purpose of the briefing to the Home Affairs Minister.
Okay, so the Home Affairs Minister is not the Foreign Minister.
Yeah.
Why was Mr Dutton being briefed about this matter, which seemed to be a Foreign Affairs matter?
Because he's our Minister. That's the way we brief our Minister, and our Minister then takes it upon himself or herself to determine a course of action.
Okay.
So it's really important, Minister, that the investigation or the brief we do in relation to these matters never includes the names of the persons of interest. We don't brief ministers on persons of interest, such as Mr Bajani.
So even you don't brief ministers on persons of interest, is that what you just said to me?
But certainly in relation to our investigations, it's very unusual that we would do that.
But it's not impossible.
Well, I think Mr McCartney would probably concur with my statement noting on his current role through the SIOP.
Can I, I'm expressing some concern about that. I mean, it's the Minister who should be protecting Australia Home Affairs. He needs information. You're not the only people who need information. He needs information to operate in his role.
I don't see... sorry, I'm a bit confused by that.
You just said you didn't give him the details.
The purpose of the briefing was in relation to my concerns I had, or we had, in relation to the issues around affecting office officials to enter Nauru. And the fact is we also had, as you'd be well aware, we had a number of Australian officials currently living and working on Nauru at the time of this matter.
Okay, but let me go back to Mr Dutton and the briefing. Mr Dutton said a briefing did not take place. He's wrong in that regard. There was a briefing.
Our records indicate a briefing took place.
Okay. Now, at a minimum, if you provided him with a briefing about Nauru, you must have been able to tell him at the same time that you were investigating Australian companies in persons of bribing Nauruan officials.
We would have told him it was a foreign interference investigation, but we wouldn't have gone into any details, Minister.
Well, I'm a senator, yep,
Sorry.
But that's okay. That shocks me that you wouldn't have gone into any details, frankly, Mr Gagan.
Let's pick ourselves up off the floor.
The AFP only investigates Australian companies or persons for foreign bribery, is that correct?
Yes.
So you were in a position to know this information. Why wouldn't the AFP have specifically mentioned Mr Bajani and Radiance International?
Because as the custom and practice, we don't mention individuals to ministers.
But you're briefing him on Nauru. You've got this matter on foot. It's a foreign bribery matter and it's related to his portfolio. But you don't think he should know?
That's not a matter for us to brief him on. We don't brief on individuals to ministers. It's inappropriate.
But at the time, Radiance International was being paid money by Mr Dutton's department.
I wasn't aware of that.
So why wouldn't the department tell the minister then?
It's a matter for the department.
Surely that's something that the minister should know. Did you check to make sure that the department was...
Not an issue for us, Senator.
So you're operating in a silo from the department, is that correct?
We're operating in our lane.
Let's go back to the meeting that Mr Dutton said did not occur, but we have now established did occur on the afternoon of the 12th of July in 2018. At a minimum, Mr Dutton was told that there were matters of concern about Nauru. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's all he was told?
No, we explained the fact that we believed our overt action in relation to a foreign bribery matter would potentially impact on our relationship with that country, which I've stated that previously.
So, at the time that Mr Dutton's the minister responsible for the department, does a lot of business with Nauru. In fact, Mr Dutton's department was responsible for a significant proportion, if not most, of the economic activity in Nauru at the time, correct? Is that correct?
I don't know. It's not our responsibility, Senator.
Ms Jones, can you help me out here?
In terms of, that was a matter for the Department of Home Affairs at the time, so I have no direct understanding or visibility of the matter.
So Mr Dutton waits until Australians are actually told that Australians have been bribing officials in Nauru before he finds out, is that correct? Mr Dutton, when did he find out about this matter?
In relation to the details of it, we'd have to take that on notice.
Mr McCartney, can you help?
I've got no knowledge of the case, Senator.
I'm very concerned that there seems to be a very significant gap in information sharing with the Minister, if I'm to take your evidence at face value. Discussing Nauru, there's an investigation already underway from, you told me, 2015.
That's correct.
And you don't ever mention this at any point to Mr Dutton?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, did you at any point indicate that you were making an investigation into Mr Bajani or that entity, the other entity, Radiance International?
Not in that briefing.
Any time between 2015 and 2018?
We didn't in the briefing. We'll take the rest of it on notice. There may have been a min brief go up or something similar. I don't have that information.
Ms Jones, can you assist?
Again, Senator, that was a matter where the Department of Home Affairs was the responsible department. I can't speak to what briefing they may or may not have provided to their then Minister.
Okay, so we'll wait for answers to questions on notice there to get a sense of Mr Dutton's awareness of the Bajani matter and at what date he might have been informed of that. If it was prior to 2018, it would surprise me that he didn't ask any questions while you were briefing him on Nauru about matters that seem relevant to the Foreign Minister.
Senator, I think to provide some context in terms of normal practice, and again, we have a practical guide in terms of how we brief ministers, and that's a public document, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. It's normal practice that we don't provide a running commentary to ministers or officials on sensitive investigations.
You don't provide a running commentary,
No.
but you do advise them of matters that are of national import.
When it hits a trigger, and I think Mr Deputy Commissioner Gagan's touched upon the rationale for the briefing, but
Was it trigger 2015?
Your last question, Senator O'Neill.
I think no, I don't, that's not what he said, Senator. There's triggers that when we would obviously consider briefing a minister, but again, I just want to provide some context. We don't brief ministers or we don't provide a running commentary on investigations that
Chair,
AFPs
just to
are
close
undertaking.
this off.
Of course, it's your last question, though,
thank
and then
you.
I do need to hand over the call.
So in response to question on notice BE23-101, I'm advised that the AFP says it was aware prior to September 2018 that the Department of Home Affairs was paying millions of dollars to Radiance International while the company and Mr Bajani were being investigated by the AFP. Mr Gagan,
I've taken on notice.
you just said that you didn't know that.
Well, someone in the AFP may, but I can't recall, Senator, so we'll take it on notice.
Well, I need to find out what's correct. If somebody could find out for us today. I mean, there is a question on notice. There must be some work that you've done previously. So let's get that sorted today, because it seems to me there's an extraordinary degree of protection here of information flow through to the Minister about which he absolutely should have known, should have been informed, in my view. So let's see if we can get to the bottom of that, at what is correct, and when was the Minister aware? Because that changes the complexion of the meeting that you had with him on the 12th of July 2018 quite significantly, because if he didn't ask questions and he already knew, that would be extremely remiss of the Minister.
We'll take it on notice.
Sorry, Senator Shoebridge.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Whilst we're on this topic, Ms Goldman, can you advise us about the scope of Operation Bernie?
Operation
Bernie?
That's an ongoing investigation, Senator.
The reports are that Operation Bernie is considering contracts from each of Broad Spectrum, Canstruct and Paladin. Is that accurate?
Senator, that's reporting that's occurred through the media. We're not going to provide commentary on an ongoing investigation.
Is Home Affairs or any of the officials within Home Affairs the part of the Operation Bernie investigation?
Again, it's an ongoing investigation and we're not going to provide a running commentary on it, Senator.
Well, I'll ask you this. Given there's a potential that at the time these contracts were negotiated, the AFP was within the same cluster as Home Affairs and reporting to the same minister, are there arrangements in place to ensure the independence of the AFP investigation in that regard, if it has to investigate Home Affairs? And if so, what are they?
Well, I think as the Commissioner has noted, in terms of the processes we now have in place with the oversight of the Sensitive Investigations Oversight Board in relation to these investigations, they canvass these sorts of issues, Senator, when departments and ministers should be briefed. But again, I go back to the point that I raised with Senator O'Neill. In terms of operational independence, we don't provide a running commentary to ministers or departments if there's no requirement to provide that information.
Was Minister Dutton at any point advised, and if so when, that Canstruct was the subject of an AFP investigation?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
And I'm asking the same question in relation to both Broad Spectrum and Paladin.
I'll take that on notice.
Has Home Affairs fully cooperated with the AFP in relation to Operation Burning?
There's been engagement with Home Affairs and it's been productive engagement, Senator.
Have they fully cooperated?
Yes.
And you will provide on notice with you what arrangements are in place to ensure the independence of the AFP investigation, which cuts across Home Affairs, given the fact, as I put to you before, that at the time it would appear the matters of the investigation occurred, you were within the same cluster and reporting to the same minister. You'll provide.
I'll take it on notice, Senator, but like I said, there's a set and strict process in place in terms of the role of the Sensitive Investigations Oversight Board, but also guidelines in terms of when ministers should be briefed on sensitive investigations. But we're happy to take that on notice.
Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, and thanks for those words, Chair. Can I just indicate that the BE 23101 question that I referred to, where it's been discussed that there were some errors in that response, can I suggest that you revisit that entire set of quans, because it says at question 5 that the AFP doesn't hold a record of what information was briefed to the Minister on or around the 12th of July. But Mr Gagan, you seem to have indicated that you may have further information. So can you provide that on notice, because I'm going to need to move on with some further questions. And I ask you to revisit all these questions because it seems that material can be provided. So I'm seeking the material that was not attached to the questions in response to questions I noticed from Senator Polley.
Senator, we will revisit the entire
set of questions. Yes, because it does appear that there were some records that were denied previously.
We will fix it.
Okay, assume for a moment that the AFP did not tell Mr Dutton, because we haven't got sufficient evidence at this point of time based on that set of seemingly incorrect quans, that it was investigating Mr Bajani or Radiance International for foreign bribery. The fact that Mr Bajani's company had a contract with Mr Dutton's department was reported by the ABC in September 2018, and I've got documents there to be shared with colleagues and with the Commissioner and the department. And this occurred shortly after Mr Bajani was charged with foreign bribery. So it became public, a trigger, as you've indicated this morning. So the whole world knew that Mr Dutton's department was doing business with Mr Bajani's company in September 2018. Even then, Mr Dutton appears to have done nothing. And those media reports, after those media reports, did Mr Dutton or his office ever speak to the AFP about his department's contracts with Mr Bajani's company and whether Mr Bajani was using taxpayers' money to commit foreign bribery?
I'll take that, Senator. Thanks for the question. Obviously, as you've alluded to, it was public knowledge pretty much from the time we did the search warrants and then the subsequent arrest of Mr Bajani and the media reporting. The matter of briefing Mr Dutton in relation to the actions of Home Affairs is really a matter for Home Affairs. They're the ones that own the contracts in relation to the matters you've alluded to. They were, like everyone else, Home Affairs were aware of the fact Mr Bajani had been charged.
So is your evidence that you never spoke to Mr Dutton about these matters you're investigating with regard to Mr Bajani?
Senator, I think for completeness and to ensure that we don't mislead the Senate, we'll take that on notice. But to the best of my recollection, I personally haven't briefed him, but we will take it on notice.
Well, it's not just you who's in the AFP, Mr Gagan. Is there anybody else who can assist with that? No. Right. Well, it's very important that we actually get the accurate information.
I agree totally.
In response to that question,
yes.
Because there was a lot that was taken on notice with regard to this matter last time, and it's been found to be very wanting in terms of fact and correctness. So this investigation into Mr Bajani was obviously significant, running for multiple years. Given it related to foreign bribery, would you characterise it as a sensitive investigation about which you gave evidence earlier this morning?
We would not, Senator. Again,
you would not?
Sorry, we would not.
Okay.
The review that the Commissioner initiated into how we handle sensitive investigations was in 2019. And
So post this event, there was a change in procedure, is that what you're telling me?
yeah, there was a review in terms of how we handle sensitive investigations, and that included the establishment of the Sensitive Investigations Oversight Board.
Clearly, foreign bribery is a crime that can have very significant implications for Australia's international relations. It's exactly the sort of investigation that the AFP would regularly brief the Minister about, isn't it?
No.
You don't brief this Minister?
I think just to help out answering the question, Senator, so for example, and I won't say the particular matter, when I needed to brief a minister on a matter and not specifics, this is general, the current AFP process, you have to go through the Sensitive Investigation Oversight Board, if it's one of their matters, to get clearance to be able to do that. And it goes back to...
Is this prior to 2019 or post?
Post.
Right, so I'm talking about in 2018.
Yes, but I'm just explaining to you the new process, and the reason why is because the complexity of matters from prior to 2019, that whole environment has changed rapidly, and that's why we need to have a better oversight of these kind of complex matters. So I guess
Mr Kershaw, you can understand why I'm concerned. There's a lot of information that seems to have not flowed through to ministers in other departments, like the robo-debt, the obfuscation that went on there that's now a matter of record. I want to understand very clearly, like I'm not on this committee very often, but as an Australian citizen and representing them here, I want to know that when there's serious stuff going on, that the people who need to know hear. So can you answer this question for me? How would the AFP have kept Mr Dutton as the responsible minister up to date with its activities, in particularly with regard to this matter, this operation with Mr Bajani involving foreign bribery and Nauru in the portfolio where he was spending Australian tax money? He was the one who was spending the most.
Senator, I think, Mr McCartney's answered this the same way. We don't provide running commentary to ministers in relation to investigations.
Do you ever update them periodically, Mr Gagan?
Certainly, as we move to overt action, we do. So I would expect that prior to us arresting Mr Bajani, the minister would have been advised, but they're not
Okay, so
provided.
overt action, you said you started this in 2015.
Correct.
Right, we've got 3 years time lag between 2015 and 18. Do you really want me to accept that there was no communication with a responsible minister spending the money in Nauru in the entire period between 2015 and 18? Because that just is not plausible.
Senator, some of these matters take 8, 9, 10 years, and it's possible that at a critical time of the investigation...
That's for resolution, but I'm not talking about resolution of the matter. I'm talking about informing a minister who has the purse strings where bribery is occurring and you are investigating it from 2015.
Senator, we will provide information to a minister at an appropriate juncture of an investigation. We don't provide running commentary on matters. It's inappropriate.
Did you provide submissions to Mr Dutton every once in a while on matters of importance?
Ministerial briefs are provided from time to time.
Did this matter ever raise itself as a matter of importance?
We'll have to take that on notice as to whether or not ministerial briefs were provided.
And can we get the correct answers in our responses to quants?
Yes, we've already said we will do that.
Other than the briefing in 2018, did the AFP provide Mr Dutton or his office with any information about Operation Regatta over the life of that investigation?
We'll take that on notice.
Yeah. From public reports, it appears as though Mr Bajani's involvement with Radiance International ceased in late 2020, shortly after he was convicted of foreign bribery in the timeline that you gave me earlier. But right up until he was actually convicted in August 2020, Mr Bajani and his brother controlled Radiance International. That's correct, isn't it?
I don't have knowledge of that.
That's what the public record shows, so I'm going to go on those facts.
Okay.
And for that whole period, from the beginning of the AFP's investigation from 2015 until Mr Bajani was convicted of foreign bribery in late 2020, it appears that Mr Bajani was receiving taxpayers' money from Mr Dutton's department. Did the AFP ever raise concerns or raise the issue with the Department of Home Affairs?
Home Affairs were aware of the investigation.
From what date?
We'll have to take that on notice.
From 2015?
I said we'll take it on notice, Senator.
But that doesn't help me, Mr Gagan. Like, you've been asked to provide questions answers to questions on notice. They've been found at fault. It's clear that this operation is of interest to the Senate. You should have come prepared to answer these questions.
Senator O'Neill.
The Department of Home Affairs handing money hand over fist to somebody that you're investigating. You tell me that they were aware. It's important that we get a sense of the timing on this,
I agree,
Mr.
Senator,
Gagan.
but I can't speak on behalf of the Department of Home Affairs.
2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 5 years of this company receiving money, all the while you knew about it. And now we find out the Department of Home Affairs knew about it.
Chair, point of order. I genuinely admire Senator O'Neill's passion, as she knows. However, the questioning is becoming somewhat aggressive in tone.
Okay.
I think
well, it's a degree of frustration, and I accept I don't want to badger the witnesses, but I am quite stunned at this absence of the important sharing of information. We've seen it between the ATO and the TPB. We've seen, this obfuscation.
Sorry, my point of order wasn't an invitation for Senator O'Neill to provide commentary.
Well, that's the rationale.
I mean, you know Senator O'Neill well, and I think you probably should
It's my Irish passion.
She's very passionate about these issues. Senator O'Neill, if you do have questions to put, I'll ask you to put those. And look, I think we share some disappointment across the table that these matters, which are of high public importance, don't have more information, but the processes of the Senate and the estimates will hopefully unveil them.
So thank you. Mr Gagan, you've indicated that prior to arresting Mr Bajani, the Minister would have been informed. Is that correct?
In the normal course of events, that's correct.
And what date was he arrested?
Well, he was arrested on the 14th of September 2018.
Yet we have the continuation of material of money proceeds until 2020.
That's a matter for the Department of Home Affairs. I can't answer that question, Senator. It's not within our remit to answer it.
In response to the question BE 23-101, the AFP says it was aware that the Department of Home Affairs was paying millions of dollars to Radiance International while the company and Mr Bajani were being investigated for foreign bribery. Prior to the ABC report of September 2018, the Department of Immigration reportedly entered into contracts with Radiance International in 2014, 2016 and 2018. With your investigation beginning in 2015, when did the AFP become aware that Radiance International was receiving taxpayers' money from the Department of Immigration, which subsequently became the Department of Home Affairs?
Well, certainly the investigation team was aware that Radiance International were receiving money from the Australian Government or the Department of Home Affairs, but the exact date I don't have in front of me, so I'll have to take that on notice.
So can you give me a year, Mr Gagan?
I don't have that information in front of me, Senator.
Were you involved in this investigation at the time?
I was the Deputy Commissioner Operations at the time, but I wasn't briefed on a daily basis in relation to it. We have
Were you
hundreds of
briefed on an
investigations.
annual basis? Because you should be able to remember at least a year, I think, to give me some sense of the scale.
Senators, there's a lot of investigations that go through that office.
Was this not of sufficient importance, Mr.
It was an important investigation, but I honestly can't recall when I was briefed in relation to it.
When did the AFP first inform the Department of Immigration that it was investigating Mr Bajani and Radiance International for foreign bribery?
I think, Senator, like all those questions you've asked, and I think you've actually asked that one previous to us, we'll have to take that on notice and provide a more fulsome answer to what we've previously done.
Did the Department of Immigration consult with the AFP prior to signing the contract with Radiance International in 2016?
Not to my knowledge.
Did the Department of Home Affairs consult with the AFP prior to signing the new contract with Radiance International in August 2018?
Not with myself.
Did the AFP ever tell the department that it had concerns about the department continuing to pay Mr Bajani's companies millions of dollars in taxpayers' money, or Mr Bajani was engaging in criminal conduct?
I've no information to suggest we said that to the Home Affairs Department, but in the fullness of ensuring that the Senate is provided with a fulsome answer, we'll take it on notice.
So, in your recollection...
You're getting to the end of your questions too, Senator O'Neill, so if there's a couple where you want to make sure are put on notice, now's the time.
Did you ever ask the department to stop? You're going to put that on notice for me, aren't you?
Well, I don't have that. I certainly didn't, Senator. I can tell you that.
Well, it's not a question about you, it's the AFP.
As far as the organisation is concerned, we'll have to take that on notice.
The Nine Papers has reported that the AFP is undertaking a number of investigations into foreign bribery that allegedly occurred in connection with contracts between Mr Dutton's department and contractors on Nauru in Papua New Guinea. How many foreign bribery investigations is the AFP currently undertaking?
If you give me a moment, Senator, I'll get back to you on that. Just give me a moment.
Thank you, Mr Nichols.
Yeah.
I do have to hand over the call in a second. Maybe we could get that figure from you. How long do you think that'll take you, Mr Nichols?
I think that will probably take me about 60 seconds, Senator.
Fantastic.
I'm working.
It's all right. Hand over the call.
Do you want me to ask another one?
I can ask.
Sneaking one in, I think.
I think Senator Bocock has some.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask, during Mr Dutton's lengthy tenure as the Minister for Home Affairs, how many times did the AFP brief him or provide written reports or submissions about foreign bribery investigations it was undertaking in relation to individuals or companies that had contracts with Mr Dutton's departments?
We'll have to take that on notice. That could be quite a lengthy bit of work.
You did a lot
Well,
of reporting to Mr Dutton.
I'm not sure. We'll have to do some work on it.
Mr Nichols?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As at the 26th of July 2023, there are 20 ongoing foreign bribery investigations. They're including 14 ongoing foreign bribery investigations and 6 matters before the court.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator O'Neill. I do have to hand over the call.
Can I put on notice one? Given
very quickly.
Thank you. Given the frame of what you've just said, that these are ongoing, and my concern, based on the answers to the questions received this morning, that there certainly was a very significant communication gap. What communication structures have been established to prevent Australian taxpayers investigating a criminal for bribery while allowing him to continue to take Australian taxpayers' money? That seems an implausible reality to continue. Okay. So can you take that on notice?
Was there a question there, Chair?
Yes, I've asked for a question for a response to that. Thank you.
The Commissioner will take that on notice.
Now, from what I can tell, the Senate will be following up with this in the next few weeks, the next couple of months, making sure they get further answers from the Australian Federal Police, which are pretty dodgy to start with. Now, the bottom line to it is this, that the Labor Party set up an inquiry into corrupt allegations and then allowed 2 key witnesses, AFP and Peter Dutton, to meet. And then the evidence changed to the benefit of Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton is not meant to meet with the Australian Federal Police Commissioner unless he's got approval from the government. So given the government set up the inquiry into Peter Dutton in his time at Home Affairs, and one of the key witnesses was the Australian Federal Police, why did the government allow them to meet? They should have never done that in a million years. And as soon as they've met, a few days later, they're changing their story. Corrupt governments and corrupt politicians, they don't want to know about corruption. They'll talk it big when they're in opposition, but what happened when Anthony Albanese got into power? Well, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, he was telling us we were going to have public hearings we'd all be able to watch and see. As soon as he got into power, the public hearings are gone, except in exceptional circumstances. And it's like robo-debt. Well, all these people are meant to be charged. Who are they? When? Where? We know nothing. Now this inquiry, headed up by Dennis Richardson, former head of ASIO, who was up to his neck in covering up the East Timor bugging. Back to this matter, it's just another cover-up. Anthony Albanese is starting to look like he's got his own Phil Gatchins, copying Scott Morrison. Yeah, we're going to have an inquiry. Inquiries that never go anywhere. Now, I'll have a lot more to say on my website in that article I mentioned at the beginning, so make sure you visit my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia, and there'll be a lot of more information there. You'll be able to click on the links. Yeah, Kangaroo Court of Australia, independent media. I publish a website, YouTube channel, Facebook page and Twitter account, and I'm 100% crowdfunded from viewers like yourself. I currently have 307 patrons donating $1,956 a month, and I really need to double that to become financially viable, so please support that. You can donate any amount, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30, $40, $50 a month, whatever suits your budget. It all helps out, and the link will be below the video on YouTube, or you can go to my website for the Patreon link. And please share this video on Facebook and Twitter, etc. Thank you for your time and have a good day.